Can you make a living as an author without selling through Amazon? This is a question a lot of authors wonder. For many indie authors, all of their money, 100% of the dollars that come into their business bank accounts come from Amazon, and that is scary. A company that has algorithms that disable KDP accounts and cancel people's revenue sources, often without a human even touching it. And now you're begging a computer to re-enable your account. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. But some authors are able to have a full connection with their readers, and a financial connection and a communication connection without using Amazon at all. So how do you do that? And what kind of author is able to pull that off? We'll find out in this episode of Novel Marketing, the longest running book marketing podcast in the world. I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr., CEO of Author Media, and this is the show for writers who want to build their platform, sell more books, and make a living writing books worth talking about. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast by clicking follow in your podcast app on your phone or clicking subscribe on YouTube. And our guest today has carved out an amazing niche in the middle grade market. He's an indie author with over 6 million copies sold of his 48 books. And he's even done a crowdfunding campaign to convert his books into a TV show that raised $4.5 million. So we're talking real numbers from a really successful author. Connor Boyack, welcome to the Novel Marketing Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, so tell us your story. How did you get started as a writer?
Well, I was a horrible English student in school, so we'll start there. I did not like to write. I didn't like to write things I didn't care about. My passion came after college when I became very passionate about economic and civic and political type ideas. This was 2005 or 6, so blogging was just taking off. So I started a blog and it developed a little bit of a readership. I was talking about some provocative ideas, but I got really almost embarrassed because a lot of people were reading what I considered to be not that great. So necessity being the mother of invention, I figured out in a very short span of time how to improve my writing. I really had a concentrated effort on figuring out persuasive writing, doing a couple courses online, reading a lot of other good books to inform how I could write well. And so the blog's success parlayed over into my first book. There was no vision at the time for writing lots of books or becoming an author as a profession or as an income generating endeavor. But one book led to another. The market response was just like, hey, more. And so I leaned into that, and now it's consumed quite a bit of my life to produce these assets. But it's something I've become very passionate about, and I find myself often talking with aspiring authors, giving them some tips and ideas on how to be a successful author, which I'm excited to unpack a little bit here with you and your audience.
Yeah, what's really reproducible about that strategy, and what I like about it, is that blogging allows you to practice in public with very discrete, small works of writing in which you get immediate feedback or no feedback at all, which is its own form of feedback. For nonfiction, blogging is amazing. For fiction, I like short story writing for that same way. Because you go to somebody and you're like, hey, can you give me feedback on my 100,000 word novel? That's a massive ask. But if you come to them with a short story, they're more likely to say, sure, I'll give it a shot. I'll give you some feedback. And so starting with the small things, right? Everyone wants to jump straight to their magnum opus, and being faithful with the little things, learning how to write a blog post before you learn to write a chapter, learning how to write a chapter before you write a book really does make a difference.
I think another benefit too of doing that kind of incremental serialized type of publishing is that you're also building the nucleus of an audience. When I wrote my first book, I had some friends and associates, acquaintances edit the early manuscripts, and I had consistent blog commenters and so forth. These people became my early evangelists to share the final copy of the book with all their friends and buy 20 copies to give out as Christmas gifts and so forth. And so that's another helpful strategy, is not just getting your own feedback and practice, but you're identifying who are the people that can help you become those early evangelists.
The real life people, right? We're not talking a marketing persona here. We're talking about, oh, this is Timothy, the guy who leaves a comment on every third blog post, and you get a sense of what he wants and what he's looking for. And having that real life person that you're targeting, or those real life people, gives you the courage to be more specific. Because I think a big part of your success and why you've sold so many copies is that you're not trying to thrill everyone. Right? Your books are polarizing, right? People love them or hate them. People aren't ambivalent about the Tuttle twins, unless maybe they haven't heard about them at this point. But most people have a really strong opinion, and that's really useful for marketing, rather than everybody Tuttle twins, that's okay. Right? Nobody says that about the Tuttle twins.
That's right. Ultimately, what you want to be doing is flag planting. That's what I call or consider the strategy you're outlining. I want to plant my flag in the ground and say, here's what I stand for, here's what I believe, who's with me. And inevitably, because you're taking a provocative, bold, statement, or you've got this amazing idea or this unique thing that you're exploring in your book, you're going to attract to you the people who are interested. You're also going to repel people who may disagree with you. Some authors get very sensitive about that. They feel like, oh, you're attacking my baby. This is my, as you say, magnum opus or my life's work. And they take it personally. When I've been attacked for the Tuttle twins, I smile. I see it as a gift. When CNN came after us and said that we're creating a right-wing children's education complex, I took that article, I screenshotted it, I took it, turned it into an ad, I put some money behind it, I emailed it out to our list, which at the time I think had 500,000 people or something. And I said, hey, everybody, this weekend only, I'm doing a coupon code CNN, and you can get 50% off of our books. I sold over 100,000 books in a single weekend using my opposition to, again, attract to me the people who want to be on our side of the flag. So yes, taking a position, making a stand, being bold in something can be divisive, but you're going to attract the right people, almost magnetizing them to you. And you're going to turn off some people who may become your evangelists unwittingly by saying something that you could turn into an ad and have some fun with it.
And better be honest about it than to hide it. And somebody is halfway into your book, and then they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know it had this content. I didn't know this book was a steamy romance. I didn't know this author was conservative, or whatever it is that your thing is. And then suddenly they're leaving you a negative review. Whereas if you had planted your flag in the first place, those people would have never made a purchase and never had an unhappy experience. So you're actually benefiting both the people who would agree with you and the people who wouldn't enjoy your book by being really clear and open about it up front.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you said a word earlier that I think is really important. And as we get into my story and how we've achieved our success, it's integral to that success. You used the word connection with your audience. And I think that's where most authors really struggle, is identifying, especially when you're going through intermediaries. Anytime you're relying on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any of these big companies, they are the ones connecting with the customer. They are the ones acquiring the customer's information. They are the ones able to communicate with that individual in the future about other opportunities. You have no such connection. And so authors inevitably find it very hard to build their marketing and their social media and their following, because people aren't individually connecting with them. There are some ways to mitigate against them that you can get creative, but that's why I've become such a fan of the direct sale approach, because I want to know who my customers are. I want to communicate with them. I want to serve them. I want to create more value for them. I want them to trust me. And there's power in the list. I want to build a large customer list so that not only can I sell my books, you can start up affiliate sale opportunities in your niche. You can start public speaking and use your list to find paid public speaking opportunities, and on and on. But that doesn't happen if you're not growing a list, if you're not connecting with your audience.
And it makes you more resilient to technical failure. It makes you more resilient to political opposition. The more direct that connection is, the less likely you are to get canceled. Because
that's right.
If they can't completely cancel you, a partial cancellation actually can cause people to rally to the flag and gather around you. Right? A handful of negative reviews cause people to want to leave positive reviews. So going back to your story, you're starting to write these books. You get your start on blogging, and now you're putting these books together. Were you planning to go independent from the beginning, or did you try to go traditional? Walk us through that decision.
My first two books were more of a religious nature, and so I did go with a traditional publisher. My mother has published a dozen or two books. My grandma wrote a book, and so it's kind of been in the family a little bit. And at the time, it's all I knew was just getting published with a publishing company. I did that. It was an okay experience. They're a good publisher. But what I realized was they did zero marketing. They had no budget for it. They didn't really know my audience directly, even though it was part of the broader kind of religious sphere within which they were publishing. And while they did a good job on producing the book, I came to realize, wait a minute, you're not doing marketing. And also the stuff that you're doing for my book, I can hire people on Upwork to do for me. Why am I surrendering to you the control, the revenue,
and the data?
And the
That's
data.
the biggest thing. The
Exactly.
publisher gives you twice a year a report on how your book is selling that's not broken down by channel. It's not broken down by date. And so you have no idea what's working, what's not working. That's because everyone's like, oh yeah, I know, I've got to do the marketing and my publisher will handle the rest of it. But it's like, how can you do the marketing without the data? If you
That's
can't
right.
track what's working, what's not working, everything else aside, you're guaranteed to lose because you're not allowed to look at your dashboard, not to mention margins and all of the other reasons that you pointed out.
And how do you learn and how do you iterate and how do you pivot and experiment if you don't know what's working and what's not working? So these were some of the realizations I was making in a very just kind of organic sense. I didn't sit down and have this strategic planning session about it. I just started to be like, I didn't really like that part. And oh, wait a minute, I could do better than that. And so when it came time to write my first Tuttle Twins book, this was 2013 is when we started working on this. I actually shopped it around to some publishers. I went to some children's book publishers. Keep in mind, this is 2013, over a decade ago. And I would go to the children's book publishers and I said, hey, here's this concept. I want to talk to young kids and teach them about the ideas of a free society. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship and property rights and money and individual liberty and so forth. And the collective response I got back from these publishing companies was, hey, cool, interesting idea. We just don't touch anything political. And so then I would go to the political publishers, the Regneries and others, kind of right of center type publishers. And I would go to them and I'd say hey guys, I got this idea. It's for kids. They're like, oh, we just don't do any kids stuff. It's all nonfiction mass market for adults. So of necessity in the early days, we kind of found ourselves between a rock and a hard place and decided to self-publish and start our own little imprint, which has grown into a full-fledged publishing company. So it was a little bit of necessity, but I very, very quickly latched onto the vision and the opportunity that it presented because of that experience I had had in, as you say, not having the data and not getting more of the revenue, not having the control. So when I outsourced to a few contractors the cover design and the editing and the typesetting and so forth, I'm like, that's easy and affordable, and I can have it be exactly what I want, so I maintain the control. And then we launched our own website, we started selling books. Now, importantly, we did make one critical decision at the beginning, which I, in retrospect, am grateful for. It wasn't a thought out decision. It wasn't a master planned idea. It was more of a hunch. And that was, we did not list on Amazon. We did not list on any intermediaries. And the kernel of the thought in my mind was, why not start our own website and have people come to us? I didn't understand how much power there is in a list and the opportunities that come from connecting with your audience. It was just a little bit of a grain of an idea. But in retrospect, I'm so thankful for that because we didn't list on Amazon until about year 6 or 7 of what we were doing, because I wanted to know everyone who bought book number 1 so that I could then communicate with them and sell book number 2. If I'm on Amazon, I'm like, I hope and pray that Amazon is going to send an email to those customers saying, hey, there's a second book out in the series, but they're unlikely to do so. And so in the marketing world, we call that spray and pray, right? You're just throwing it out there. Hopefully my customers who have bought the last books will see that I published another one. We wanted to know everyone who bought book 1 so that we could directly tell them about book 2 and then 3 and then 4 and start to get that snowball going down the hill, getting bigger and bigger as you gain some momentum. Even to this day, now that we've been on Amazon for a few years, they probably comprise about maybe 1% of our sales.
What platform do you use, just to get into real nitty-gritty real quick? Are you using Shopify or WooCommerce?
We have been on WooCommerce for the past decade. We, over the next 6 months, are going to be transitioning to Shopify. It'll be a complicated migration because we have so many features and plugins that we've added over the years. But we have been persuaded that Shopify will be better, and so we're heading in that direction. So if I were to start new, I would suggest looking at Shopify to start out.
Yeah, I recommend for somebody just getting started, if you're small, to go with PayHip because they're the seller of record and handle sales taxes and whatnot. But once you're selling over, I'd say $1,000 or several $1,000s worth of books every month, Shopify has a lot of powerful features that are really nice, and their checkout is the next best to Amazon in terms of ease of use. It's a really easy.
Yeah.
I'm curious what pushed you over the edge, though, because WooCommerce is also really good and very popular.
I've enjoyed WooCommerce. We've just had, as you add more and more and more plugins, you just start to get a little bit of feature creep and some conflicting issues. So we've just had some technical back-end things that have caused big headaches. We've talked to a number of companies who have migrated, and we think, especially for the checkout reason that you mentioned and some of the things that Shopify does really well, that's going to help increase our conversion rates, page optimization, the speed of loading of our website, and so forth. So for a variety of reasons, each in a little way, we felt like it added up to enough for us to justify making the move.
Okay. So you started off with WooCommerce. You've got your first Tuttle Twins book. How did you print it? Did you go with an offset printer and just had a warehouse full of books, or were you going with Ingram Spark print on demand?
We did explore print on demand with Ingram. I received some samples. They send a little sample kit, at least they used to when you'd request it. And what I did not like was that they had just a set kind of few options from which to choose, certain sizes, certain paper weights, and so forth. And again, the thing I didn't like about Publisher, this shows kind of my libertarian side, is I didn't like the control. I wanted the freedom. So I ultimately decided to raise the money. Now we're structured a bit differently. I do all of our book publishing through a nonprofit. And so I was able to raise donations to cover the cost of the first book. We did go with an offset printer that is here local to us after we got a few bids. They were very competitive and convenient. And so I did have a bunch of books in my basement. And in the early days of the Tuttle Twins, I would come home at night. I would put the kids to bed at the end of the day. I would sit down and turn on Netflix or whatever, and I would pack the, dozen orders from the day while watching a show. Next morning going into work, drop it off at the post office, head into work, rinse and repeat every single day. I did that for, probably a year or two. When things started ramping up, I hired someone part-time to take it off my plate, then someone full-time, and then 3 full-time people. Then we got our own warehouse and on and on and on. But again, that snowball going down the hill started very small. The frustration a lot of people get in talking to me when I talk to these aspiring authors is they see me way up here and selling all these books and oh my gosh. And I'm like, you don't get it. Like it started, bare bones for us. And so don't compare yourself now to where I'm at. Let's talk about those early days and how you get kind of creative and entrepreneurial about starting to get something off the ground.
And every bit of this is reproducible, including the raising the funds, actually. You don't have to be a nonprofit to raise funds for your book. It has the advantage in that it's tax deductible, but for most of your readers, they're taking the standard deduction on their tax return. And so them making a tax deductible donation of $20 to you isn't actually going to reduce their tax liability at all. Not to get too technical, but most people are taking the standard deduction right now, which means that you can put your book on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or one of these other crowdfunding platforms, and you can raise thousands of dollars. And I have, if you don't believe me, I have maybe a half a dozen or a dozen episodes where I interview authors who've done successful Kickstarters. And in many ways, the Kickstarter is easier than Connor's method. It's definitely easier than setting up a 501c3, but it's easier in the sense that by doing it through the nonprofit, let's say there's another nonprofit that already existed that was managing this. Now he's got to work inside of their apparatus and it's got to use their website and the checks have to go in the right. There's a lot of complications, whereas Kickstarter is really straightforward. The rewards for people who support your book are the book, right? Here's a signed copy. Here's a special edition. It doesn't have to be that popular. And going back to what we talked about at the beginning, the kinds of campaigns that do the best on Kickstarter are the plant your flag type campaigns, because people will rally to that and help make it possible and have that sense of ownership of like, this book wouldn't have existed if I hadn't have contributed to make it possible, which then motivates them to help get the word out. So you've got this engine running where orders are coming in and you're writing more books and you're growing your team. But we've got to answer a really big question. I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, Yeah, but how did people find out about the books if you're not on Amazon and you weren't in any other bookstores either? It's not like you were
Correct.
just snubbing Amazon. You were snubbing Barnes & Noble and Apple and
Correct.
the whole shebang. And because you went offset, your cost per copy for your paper books was low enough where you're actually making money off the paper copies of the book, which is a big difference in this strategy. For people who are print on demand, they're only making $1 or $2 a book often. So there's not a lot of money in the paper. But when you're offset, the money is higher if you can afford that initial outlay, because it's often thousands and thousands of dollars to get the print run.
I printed 5,000 copies of our first Tuttle Twins book. And at that quantity of books, I'm going off of memory, but I think I was paying around like $2.30 per book. Our books are about 60 pages, full color and so forth, 6x9. So yeah, I was selling them for $9.99. I was giving little discounts and things, but you're right, far better margin than you would be if you're paying. I think Ingram now is like $5 or something for that same format of book. And by the way, we translate our books into a number of other languages, and we don't sell a ton in those other languages, so I don't do offset for those. Because my volume is much lower, I do use Ingram to print all of our different translated books because it suits us well for that use case.
And it also has the advantage of they can often print them in the country where the book is being purchased, which reduces shipping and tariffs. Some
That's
countries, the tariff trying to get a book into that country is 20%, 30%. Taxes,
Yep.
man.
You're talking to a libertarian. I'll agree with you on that all day long. So 5,000 copies of the book, $2.30. You can do the math of how much money I had to raise, in addition to all the contractors I was paying to help me produce it and so forth. So I think I raised like 15, 20 grand, build the website, print the books, all that. And that was what got us started. My customer acquisition strategy was what we said before. I had been blogging. I had been talking about this online. I had been sharing on social media, predominantly Facebook back in 2013, about the work in progress. Hey, here's the first character is designed. Give me your input. Hey, we refined it. Here's version 2. What do you think? People love getting behind the scenes peeks into the process. It is such an effective way to market. It invites them into the experience. They feel included and part of it. They feel like they have some skin in the game a little bit. So later when you have an ask, when it's like, hey, now buy the book that you've been participating in creating, they're a lot more likely to do it. And so I did a lot of behind the scenes sharing about that first book. I was publishing excerpts of the book itself. I had my nucleus from my blogging, that kind of contact list, people commenting on my blog. So I had all their email addresses, subscribed to the email and so forth. So that was my nucleus. I launched the website. We had a very modest fundraising budget, I think maybe like $2,000 to kind of make a splash with the book. We went to a couple conferences to have a booth and try and, promote the book.
Were these political conferences or like homeschool book fairs? What kind of events were these?
In the early days, there were more political ones. Later, we transitioned heavily into the homeschool conferences where we now are spending a majority of our time. Some parenting conferences as well. But in the early days, it was, for example, there's a conference called Freedom Fest, which is a bunch of liberty-minded people that gather once a year, mostly in Vegas each year. And so we set up a booth at Freedom Fest and we said, hey, come teach your kids and grandkids about these ideas. So a very small budget, very small nucleus. From there, it was a lot of word of mouth. Fortunately, we had spent so much time trying to create an amazing book that people were, this was a novel thing, right? Talking to kids about political ideas in 2013. Nowadays, there's kids' books on all kinds of stuff, and probably stuff that you might morally detest. There's now kids' books for it. But a decade ago, there wasn't. And so we were kind of this novel thing, and people were like, oh, what is this? And sharing it with their friends.
And the Facebook algorithm was different. Back in 2013,
yes,
it was a lot easier to create an image and have that image go viral and people could share and spread. If you had tried that now, putting the competition aside, the inside stuff on Facebook would not have gotten the kind of reaction. You'd have to do that on hope for TikTok or maybe YouTube Shorts. One of those video platforms might have worked, but really it's more of a kind of an email list sort of thing in terms of what would work today, I would say.
I completely agree with you with one exception. Organic Facebook, I completely agree. The large majority of our sales has come through paid Facebook ads over the years. And this is where a lot of authors deeply struggle. I did in the first year and a half until I had someone come to me and suggest an idea that I'm so thankful for. I will share in just a moment. But my issue was I had no margins. I had like $2 or $3 per sale. I wasn't taking any money myself. I was trying to reinvest and grow this thing. And like, how do you have a marketing budget? I see people trying to do Amazon ads. They're selling, a $14.99 book. Maybe Amazon's taking 30%, or if you're using Advantage or one of their other programs, they're taking like 50 some odd percent. And after all your expenses, you don't have very much of a margin with which to acquire customers. Let's say generously that you have $5 of revenue per book sold. It's extremely hard to acquire a customer. In fact, mostly impossible to acquire a customer for $5 on a lot of these platforms. So what this other individual shared with me, and what I've since been able to share with a lot of other authors, is, and this is where direct sales really shines, because you can't do this on Amazon, is not selling a book, but selling a bundle.
Yep.
So let's say I just have one Tuttle Twins book. In fact, this is what I did when I just had my first book. I have my one book for $9.99, but then I was challenged by this individual. What additional value can you create for your potential customer that would get them to spend $30 on you? What, how would I do that? So suddenly in addition to the $9.99 book, I added a $6.99 activity workbook, printable PDF, one-time investment, and then it's no cost for us. So $6.99 for the activity workbook. So I could say, hey, after your kids read the book, then you can have them do some of these activities and reinforce the learning from the book, right? We did an audiobook for $7 or $8.99. So I hired someone, and she's since done all of our books. So we got a professional audiobook recording done. And then we created a parent guide. Hey, mom and dad, your kids are going to be reading about this topic. You probably didn't learn about it that well in school. Here's a parent guide that can help you, learn about this topic and have some discussion questions with your kids. Suddenly I had a bundle that had a retail value of, over $30. I could offer a, hey, 10% discount or whatever. I played with a lot of different discounts. But now my margins are like $20+ on a single book where I've just created some digital bonuses. And so because people are coming to me to buy that, I can easily fulfill, immediately download. They can download all those bonuses. But I've persuaded them to spend more money, increasing my revenue margin, so that I can reinvest that into ads and start to build that snowball going down the hill. So those bundles, that has been our magic secret sauce. Not so secret, but that's been the key for our growth, is charging a high enough price so that we have a healthy revenue margin. I spent, $3 million+ last year on marketing alone for these books. We sold like $10 million in total revenue. And so again, getting bigger over time, but that's the power of just reinvesting this revenue, having that revenue margin, having the direct sale to your website, running paid ads. So I agree with you on organic Facebook, but even still, as a lot of people are leaving Facebook ads still work very well as on all the other social platforms as well.
Yeah, I was just reading today about the changes that Elon Musk is doing to X and the advertising platform there, and how they're adding a lot of AI. Have you played with Twitter's advertising platform at all?
It's funny that you're asking me that, because I literally have a calendar appointment tomorrow morning for 3 hours to go set up our Twitter ads for the first time, because I saw that as well. And I'm like, okay, I think it's finally time for us to start experimenting here.
Well, once you do that, come back on. I'd love to do a case study, and we'll zoom in and look at exactly how that does. Because Twitter has grown by like 50% since Elon Musk has taken it over, and the number of bots are down. Like, I feel like it's a much better platform, and the cost per click. I saw a chart that the cost per click is like 41 cents a click. It was like way cheaper on a cost per click basis than Facebook, and it had, in my initial experiments, better targeting than Facebook did, especially for targeting anything religious, because Facebook won't let you. If you write Christian romance, can't target other Christian romance authors on Facebook. Not easily. You can play games with lookalike audiences and kind of figure it out, but you can't explicitly do it. Whereas on Twitter, on X, you can target people who like the Babylon Bee or who are like the people who like Babylon Bee. And that is really useful.
And even because I've been paying attention in the past couple of weeks at the ads on Twitter. The way that they're working is they are extremely contextual. When the original poster, the top of the big viral thread or whatever, is talking about homeschooling, then typically it's like this, it's the third post down. So you see the main post, someone else's comment, and then an ad seems to be where they are placing the ads. So it's high up in the thread, but then the ad has to do with homeschooling, right? On Facebook, when we advertise, you're able to target based on certain interests, not religious ones, as you say, but we can target people who like homeschooling. And so that's great to like hone in on people who have that general interest. It is way better. My theory is that it's going to perform better for us when you can target people who are directly in a conversation about that topic rather than, yes, I have this general interest, or 10 years ago, I had that general interest when my kids were younger, and Facebook just hasn't updated their algorithm about what I'm interested in today. Whereas, hey, I'm literally participating in a conversation about homeschooling. Oh, here's this ad about books for homeschooling. So I'm really excited to dive in. And this, to kind of tie it back, this is where I see a lot of authors struggle because they often think of themselves only as an author. I'm going to birth this book into existence. I'm so proud of it. Hopefully people will buy it, and then spray and pray, right? Like pray that someone will buy it. And then typically sales are very low. They have, if they didn't do print on demand, they have a bunch in their basement, they're frustrated and so forth. I encourage the authors, aspiring authors that I talk to structure and consider this as 1/3 authorship, 2/3 marketing. Why bother creating the thing if you don't figure out how to get people to learn about it and buy it and use it? And so to me, writing the book is only part of the equation. The publishing company is not going to market for you if you go with them. And if you're going it alone and doing your own thing, right? No one knows and loves your book more than you. You owe it to yourself and the work that you put into creating the book to then spend the time and figure out some of these marketing elements so that you can do justice to that important work that you've created.
Exactly. And you need that business mindset because you threw out a number that I just let go by, and I want to go back to that. You spent $3 million on advertising for your books, right? Now,
yes,
you did that with money that you'd made from selling your books. It's not like you
Correct.
went out and got venture funding, but that requires a business mindset. And it requires previous success, right? It's like, well, last year we spent $2 million, and the year before that we spent $1 million, and you're setting some of that money aside that you made the last year to spend this year, and you build up effectively a war chest, and you do it by being faithful in the little things, right? You had to first be able to ship those 10 books on a Tuesday afternoon. And not then take all of your profits, to take your wife out to dinner. You got to save some of that. And that thinking of, oh, this money that I just got from selling my book, this is not money I can go spend. This is money that's the business money. And a lot of that money has to stay in the business to keep that flywheel running. And then you take out a salary from the business. And it seems like a really minor shift, right? It just requires you to have a business bank account. It doesn't even really need you to have an LLC or an entity to have that thinking. Eventually you'll create an LLC. And we have episodes on that if you want to learn more. But that mindset then funds the production of your art, right? Because now you have a budget, right? If you want to go make another Tuttle Twins book, you're not concerned about how much the artist costs, right? And if the artist you've been working with is like, hey, inflation, I need more money, you're like, there's money to pay you, right? You're not scraping your pennies together because you've been paying attention to the business side.
Well, and in my circumstance, our illustrator is my partner. So we're 50-50 partners in the Tuttle Twins. So in the early days, it was a joint venture for both of us to come together and produce this and then subsequent books. And so he and I have both had that skin in the game. We're both contributing. And, what I find interesting as I reflect on my own journey is that, we probably have, 15, 20 people on our Tuttle Twins team helping do everything that's needed to sustain this. And I have a marketing team. I have people who run the ads. I have people who create the content and all of that type of stuff. But here I am tomorrow morning, as I said, going to go experiment in Twitter. Why? Because I care the most about what we're doing and I know the most. And so before I hand it off and delegate, as important as that is as you grow, right, I still participate in the marketing as the author, right? Because I think it's so central to connect with the customers, to figure out how to communicate with the customers. Once we get something working on Twitter, I'll then hand that off and say, hey guys, here you go. And now let's sustain and grow it. But again, I think so much of this is learning marketing. If I can, I'll mention 2 authors that I recommend people go to when they're trying to learn marketing. The first is Russell Brunson. He's the creator of ClickFunnels. I'm sure you've probably talked about him before on here. And he has a book called .com Secrets, which is the best place to start. He's got other books in the Secrets series, which are helpful, but .com Secrets is a very effective, simple way for people to get started in learning about e-commerce, which can be very intimidating. So he makes it very simple. And then the other one, they're actually friends, is Alex Hormozy, who's become a big social media influencer for marketing. And he has a book called $100 Offers and now one called $100 Leads. His books, I think, are even more effective and focused and helpful for people just getting started and thinking out. As we said, I need a bundle, right? I need enough revenue so that I can have that revenue margin. How do I do that? What is my offer that's compelling for people to give me their money? His book, $100 Million Offers, helps you through the thinking on that. So I found historically referring people to Russell Brunson and Alex Hormozy, they can go to these authors, start learning a little bit and feel a little bit more confident about dipping their toe in the water.
So we've talked a lot about the online marketing that you're doing, and I agree, paid advertising is the only thing on Facebook that still works. There's a lot of authors who think if they just post enough to a group or a bunch of groups and spam their book that they're going to sell. But the authors who are actually making real money on Facebook are using the method that you're using of advertising. They're not all selling directly. If you have enough novels in a series and your books are addictive enough, you can send people to Amazon and make it work. There's a whole community of authors that are able to do that, but it's a lot easier if you're selling directly, and it's easier if your audience is willing to buy from you directly, because some groups of readers, really it's Amazon or nothing, and if you're not on Amazon, they're not going to buy from you. But other readers are willing to go outside of Amazon, and I would say homeschoolers are one of the most willing to go outside of Amazon. Go ahead.
Let me take slight issue with that. I think everybody is willing to go outside of Amazon if the incentives are strong enough to do so. If it's just a random book, when I'm at Barnes & Noble, I'm pulling up my Amazon app and just ordering from Amazon to have it delivered at home to save $3, right? And so the incentives aren't strong enough for me to buy in the store. I can get it tomorrow at 4 a.m. dropped off on my porch. I don't need it for the next, 7 hours. So the incentives aren't strong enough for me to buy from a store like Barnes & Noble. Going to some random other website that I've never heard of before because I clicked on an Instagram ad, if I'm sufficiently intrigued and the value is clearly apparent, oh my gosh, 2 for 1. Or free audiobook if I buy it here within the next, they've got the little clock ticker. Oh, buy in the next 3 hours and whatever, right? So if the incentives are strong enough, I think everybody is willing to go buy on a random website. It's just that we often don't think about how do I package what I'm doing to overwhelm the customer with value.
And going back to that digital bundle, I love that approach. And that's what a lot of authors do on a Kickstarter campaign, right? They effectively create bundles because the typical Kickstarter backing amount is $50, plus or minus 10. So you have to create a reward level that makes $50 make sense. And if you have a store on your website, you can then basically continue that, right? Not necessarily the exact thing that you gave away, because Kickstarter backers expect a certain level of exclusivity, but that bundling really helps to do that. I want to talk real quick about homeschool book fairs and your approach to homeschool book fairs. I've been talking about homeschool book fairs for a long time, and a lot of people don't believe me that you can make money selling at a homeschool book fair. So what kind of sales do you see at a typical homeschool book fair?
I'll respond first by saying that for the first 5 or 6 years of doing these conferences, we did not sell any books. We brought books to display, and then we would give people coupon codes. We would send them to the website, and we would tell them, hey, if you buy today, go on your phone, scan the QR code, whatever, then you'll get this discount. So that was really born out of my laziness, because I didn't want to ship crates of books and deal with the logistics and pay for all of that. And so I had in my head that wouldn't be worth it. Well, of course, I'm at a homeschool conference where people are increasingly, they want the instant gratification. They want to walk away from the booth with the book. Their kid is there with them. The kid would love a signed copy. So I'm starting to get that feedback of like, okay, clearly people want it now. And then I'm looking around me at some of the other vendors, and they've got tons of books and bookstores with like hundreds of different books, and they've got all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, clearly there's a way to do this. I just got to figure out what it is. So last year we started doing a free book offer. We would bring a bunch of books, but we would give them away if they would scan a QR code and join our text list. We use Attentive as our SMS channel for marketing. So in exchange for joining our SMS list, which would also sign them up on our email list, we would give them a book. Our cost on our books are about $1.05. And so I'm like, hey, $1.05 for a lead, that's great. So last year it was just giving books out. That way they still got the instant gratification of getting at least a book, if not the whole series and other books that we have. But it allowed me to not have to ship crates of whatever. So we did that last year, and we said, all right, this year, let's have the experiment be the full kit and caboodle. Let's bring all the books. Let's sell them all. So we've now done, I think, 7 or 8 conferences this year. I'll talk gross, and then I'll talk net. So gross sales at these conferences probably for us averages around, I want to say, $12,000 in a 2-day. Typically, they're like a 2-day conference. So about $12,000. Net, after I'm paying for my staff who's there, the cost of the books themselves, the shipping and all of that. Net, I would say on average, we're getting about $4,000 to $5,000 per conference net. So, you can say, wow, that's impressive. Now for us, it's a drop in the bucket compared to online where the volume is much bigger. So we are going to continue to sell directly at conferences and bring everything. However, the money isn't the reason, although having some profit is great. For me, it's the connection.
Right.
It's being able, like I was just last week in Ontario, California at a homeschool convention. I'm going to one in Texas in a few weeks. Being there to connect with the kids who want to get the photo and they want to get the book signed, and then mom posts it on Instagram, and now her 800 friends are learning about the book, and I'm getting user-generated content, third-party validation, right, of what we're doing. The word of mouth is spreading. So for me, it's an investment in making really happy customers who get that instant gratification, who are excited to come talk, and me getting that feedback, learning from them. That's why we've optimized for kind of leaning into that approach.
As you're taking strangers and turning them into customers, there's the 3 stages, right? Attract, engage, and convert. And a conference can hit people at all 3 of those levels, right? A complete stranger is walking by the booth, and they're like, Tuttle Twins, what is that? And they come over, and they may not buy anything. Maybe they join your email list, and maybe they do, right? So now you have a chance to engage them. Or maybe they've bought a book, but they haven't thought about it in a long time, so it's a chance to let them know a little bit more about what you're doing. And then, of course, conversion, where they're making the purchase. For you, your main engine's online, and so it's all about growing that email list. And so it's fascinating that for the first 6 years, you just saw these conferences as a way of building that email list where you would then sell them for real online.
That's right.
Which totally makes sense. One of the things I like about conferences when you're first getting started, because if you only have one book, and you don't have a big list, you're not going to be making $12,000 at a homeschool fair. But what you will be doing is getting a lot of practice talking about your book to complete strangers, right? Totally. Every 5 minutes, somebody new is going to walk past your booth and ask you about your book, and you'll get a chance to practice your pitch. And when you're brand new, that is invaluable because you get to watch their face and see when they glaze over, and you're like, oh, I got to work on my pitch. That pitch didn't work as well as I thought it did. And you also get a sense of who's responding to my pitch. It's like, oh, the teenage boys they're going crazy, but the teenage girls are not, or it's a certain kind of teenage girl, right? Like this kind of feedback is really useful, and it then informs all the rest of your marketing because you've got a lot of real world practice in your pitching.
I was going to say that last part. You just did it. I'll just add an exclamation point to it. Our online presence has been significantly aided by our in-person pitching practice. When I figure out the right messaging, the right call to action, hey, let me push you over the edge to make the purchase right now by saying this, that becomes the headline on the website. It becomes the 2 lines in the ad on Facebook. And so it's a great real world, like that immediate feedback. It's a great testing ground for figuring out what messages are landing and sticking, and then how can I replicate that to scale it up and reach way more people with that same message.
I love that. I have to ask about your magazine. We're talking about connection, and I'm tempted to be like, why would you do a magazine? But I have small children, and they love physical magazines. Right, we get several children's magazines, and they adore them. But magazines are expensive. So what made you want to start a magazine for middle grade readers?
So, we publish all these books, and it takes a while to create the book, write the book, produce the book. And so we do, for our middle age series, probably on average a book a year. And we're about to come out with our 14th book. We've been doing this for 10 years. So, on average, roughly. And what we were finding was we wanted a way to create even more value for parents in the meantime. If they're having to wait a year for the next book, they get a lot of anxiety. My kids keep asking me, when's the next book coming out? So this becomes a way for us to create value for them on a monthly basis, maintain a close, warm relationship. So they're thinking about Tuttle Twins. They're thinking more importantly about the ideas in the Tuttle Twins and learning a lot. We're creating more value for them. Our magazine, we typically, I think the base fee is like $50 a year to get a monthly magazine. And our costs all in are probably, including the design and all of that, are probably $250 a month. So you add that up, that's, about $30. So we're making about $20 margin on the magazines. So it's sustainable, it's profitable. But for us, the primary motive has been just, again, creating even more value for the audience. If I want them to have word of mouth and share Tuttle Twins with their friends, if I just sell the one book, their kids might read it 8 times in 3 weeks before they then kind of go focus on the next thing. And then the book sits there for 2 years until they pick it up again and be like, oh yeah, let me read that again. So it's these big spikes of interest and activity, but then it craters when you just have a book quite often. That's not always the case. With a magazine, I'm touching them every single month. Now the parents are getting I send 2 or 3 emails a week to parents about current events, my thoughts on what's going on in the world. This is a high value piece of content for parents.
It's a real newsletter where you're actually talking about the news.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not like, here's our latest update from our company about our corporate, no one cares about that stuff. So yes, it's an actual newsletter. So that's for the parents. But I needed a way to continue to maintain contact and cultivate the interest of the kids. And so that's where the magazine fits into that strategy, an ongoing touch point to create more value, build that connection even more so that when I come out with the next book, they're that much more excited to get it because I have warmed them up for months. And the magazine also becomes an advertising strategy for us. Every time we have a new product release coming out, it's getting a full spread in our magazine so that all of those families who are passionate subscribers of the magazine and buying all the books, they are the first ones to find out about the new book, and then they go get it, and we have our kind of nucleus built in.
I love it. I love it. You're taking the books and you're growing it into a lifestyle brand, and we need it. ConnorBoyack.com is the website if you want to see all of what Connor's up to, but you can also go to TuttleTwins.com if you specifically want to check out the Tuttle Twins books. I will say my kids are on the young end for the Tuttle Twins, but it didn't keep me from buying them copies, and they have enjoyed them and requested to read them again, which I think is a compliment, because for a 5-year-old to like it, you're doing something right. Connor Boyack, thank you so much for joining us today on the Novel Marketing Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Thomas.
Our featured patron today is B.D. Lawrence, author of The Coyote and the One-Armed Man. Discover the thrilling world of B.D. Lawrence's one-armed detective series with The Coyote and the One-Armed Man. With a mix of suspense, mystery, and high-stakes action, this book will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you enjoyed books like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or The Bourne Identity, you are going to love this heart-pounding adventure. The Novel Marketing Podcast is a production of authormedia.com. Our guest today is Connor Boyack. Our producer is Lori Christine. The audio engineering is by William Umstadt. Blogification by Shauna Lettler. And you can find that blog version of this episode along with links to everything we talked about today at authormedia.com/421. I'm Thomas Umstadt Jr. saying thank you for listening and live long and prosper.